I was humiliated at my cousin's wedding until he did this. Matthew Thompson held the water glass with trembling hands as he tried to hide behind one of the hall's columns. He had just been kicked out of the main table by his own aunt, in front of all the guests. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered to himself again, repeating Aunt Elaine's cruel words. The groom's mother, his aunt, had made it very clear that he, the poor cousin of the family, was ruining the wedding photos with his plain beige t-shirt. The curious stares of the other guests burned into his back. Everyone was dressed elegantly, while Matthew looked down at his outfit and felt his stomach churn. It was the best thing he owned, but compared to the designer suits and dresses around him, it looked like a rag. "Matthew," a woman's voice called out. It was Bethany, his second cousin. "What are you doing here in the corner?" "Nothing, just getting some water," he replied, forcing a smile. "I heard what Aunt Elaine did. Don't mind her, you know how she is." Bethany tried to comfort him, but her eyes also assessed his simple outfit. The worst part was that Richard, the groom, his cousin who had grown up with him like a brother, had no idea what was happening. He was too busy greeting the important guests, the ones his mother insisted on impressing. Matthew decided it was time to leave. He didn't belong in that world of luxury and appearances. He started walking toward the exit when he heard his aunt loudly telling a group of ladies, "It's a shame when some relatives don't understand that certain standards must be upheld. Imagine showing up to a wedding like this, dressed as if you were going to a county fair." The laughter that followed felt like knives in his back. Matthew quickened his pace, but before he could reach the door, someone grabbed his arm. "Cousin, where do you think you're going?" It was Richard, impeccable in his Italian suit, the white rose on his lapel only highlighting the difference between them. "I need to go, Richard. I have an appointment," Matthew lied. "An appointment? On my wedding day?" Richard frowned. "You're the best man in my heart, even if my mother insisted on having the mayor's son as the official best man." "Look, Richard, I really should go. Your mother's right. I don't fit in here." Matthew tried to pull away, but Richard tightened his grip. "What did my mother say now?" "Nothing much. She just made it clear my presence wasn't welcome at the main table. And she's right. Look how I'm dressed." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. Richard looked around and saw his mother chatting animatedly with the wealthy guests, gesturing toward where Matthew stood. His face hardened. "Come with me," he said, pulling his cousin along. "Richard, no. I don't want to cause trouble at your wedding." Matthew resisted. "You're not causing any trouble. Someone else is." Richard guided him firmly through the hall. They stopped in the middle of the dance floor where everyone could see them. The DJ had just lowered the music for the speech portion. Richard took the microphone. "Excuse me, everyone. Before the official speeches, I need to address something important," Richard announced, his voice echoing through the hall decorated with white orchids and gold accents. Aunt Elaine hurried over, her navy blue dress rustling. "Richard, darling, what are you doing? The speeches aren't until after dinner," she whispered, but the microphone picked up her voice. "Mother, please give me a minute," Richard cut her, off politely but firmly. Then he turned to the guests. "I'd like to introduce everyone to my cousin, Matthew Thompson." Matthew's face burned. Hundreds of eyes turned toward him. He tried to step back, but Richard placed a hand on his shoulder, keeping him in place. "Matthew and I grew up together in rural Kentucky. When my father abandoned us, it was his family who took us in. His mother, my Aunt Margaret, shared the little she had with us," Richard continued, his voice choked with emotion. "Richard, this is neither the time nor the place," Aunt Elaine tried to intervene, her face flushed with embarrassment. "Yes, it is, Mom. It's exactly the time and place," Richard replied. "When you were working 3 jobs to support us, it was at Matthew's house that I did my homework. It was Aunt Margaret who bandaged my scrapes, who scolded me when I misbehaved." The hall was utterly silent. Even the waiters had stopped serving. "When I got into law school, Matthew was the first to celebrate. When I opened my own firm, he was there helping me paint the walls because I couldn't afford to hire anyone." Richard looked directly at his mother. And now, on the most important day of my life, you want me to stand by while he's humiliated over an outfit? Son, you don't understand. The Worthingtons are here, the people from the courthouse, Aunt Elaine tried to argue. So what? Are they going to stop being my clients because my cousin is wearing a t-shirt? Richard turned to the guests. If anyone here has a problem with my cousin's presence or his clothes, you can leave right now. The buffet's already paid for. No one moved. Some guests even looked ashamed. Matthew, Richard continued, still at the microphone, you're not just my cousin, you're my brother. And if my mother can't see that, that's her problem. Richard, please, Matthew whispered. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do. You know why? Because when I was ashamed to bring a lunchbox to school, you told me there's no shame in being honest. When I wanted to drop out because I couldn't afford textbooks, you sold your bike to help me. Tears began streaming down Matthew's face. At the back of the hall, a few guests were visibly moved. Mom, Richard addressed Aunt Elaine, you may have forgotten where we came from, but I haven't. And if you think appearances matter more than character, then maybe you're the one. Who shouldn't be at the head table? The room erupted in murmurs. Aunt Elaine was pale, her hands shaking with anger. How dare you speak to me like this in front of everyone? She hissed. How dare you treat someone whose real family this way? Richard shot back. Then, to everyone's surprise, he began removing his suit jacket. You know what, if the problem is the clothes, what are you doing? Lauren, the bride, approached, her French lace dress gliding over the polished floor, showing what really matters. Richard took off the jacket completely and handed it to a stunned waiter. Then he loosened his tie and removed it too. There, now we match better. Richard, you've lost your mind. Aunt Elaine was on the verge of tears. You're ruining your own wedding. No, Mom, I'm saving it. Richard took Lauren's hand. Sweetheart, I'm sorry for this, but you need to understand something. If we're going to build a family together, it has to be based on real values, not appearances. Lauren looked from Richard to Matthew, then to Aunt Elaine. The entire room held its breath, waiting for her response. You're right, she said finally, her voice clear and firm. Then, to everyone's shock, she kicked off her designer heels. These heels were killing me anyway. A few nervous laughs echoed through the hall. The tension began to ease slightly. Matthew, Lauren said to him, Richard's told me so much about you, about how you used to fish together by the river, about the stories you'd make up about how you'd defend him from the older boys at school. He also got into trouble for my sake, Matthew replied, his voice choked. I know, and that's why I want you at our table. Actually, she glanced at Richard, I think we should rearrange the seating. I want to sit next to the people who truly matter to us. This is outrageous, Aunt Elaine exploded. You're going to ruin everything. What will people say? How about the truth, Mom? Richard suggested. That we're a family who values love over appearances? At that moment, an elderly gentleman stood up from one of the tables. It was Dr. Worthington, one of Richard's most important clients. May I say something? He asked, and Richard handed him the microphone. Aunt Elaine, with all due respect, you're wrong. I hired your son not for the suit he wears, but for the integrity he shows. And what I just witnessed only confirms I made the right choice. Other guests began to clap, slowly at first, but soon the entire room was on their feet applauding. Besides, Dr. Worthington continued, let me share a secret. This very expensive suit I'm wearing, it's rented, because I learned long ago that character isn't bought in a boutique. The laughter now was genuine, and the wedding's atmosphere had completely shifted, but Aunt Elaine wasn't ready to back down. You don't understand, she shouted. I worked my whole life to get out of that miserable little town, to give my son a better life, so he wouldn't have to go through what I did. And I'm grateful for that, Mom. Richard stepped closer to her. But somewhere along the way you lost yourself. You started believing that being better meant being superior to others. I only wanted what was best for you, Aunt Elaine began to cry. The best for me is having the people I love close, no matter what they're wearing. Richard hugged his mother. You have a choice, Mom. Keep living this fantasy of superiority, or accept that our family is just this. Imperfect, simple in some ways, but real. The room fell silent again, everyone waiting for Aunt Elaine's response. She looked around, saw the expectant faces, some understanding, others still judgmental. Then she looked at Matthew. Forgive me, she said so softly almost no one heard. What? Matthew stepped closer. Forgive me, she repeated, louder. I let pride speak louder than my heart. Margaret was more of a sister to me than anyone, and I dishonored her memory by treating you this way. Matthew felt a lump in his throat. His mother had passed 5 years ago, and since then, Aunt Elaine had only grown more distant. Aunt Elaine? No, let me speak. She interrupted. When your mother was gone, I should have taken care of you like she did for Richard. But I was so obsessed with keeping up appearances that I forgot what really matters. It's okay, Aunt. Matthew hugged her, and for the first time in years, she hugged him back. No, it's not. She pulled away and looked him in the eyes. But it will be. Richard, Lauren, you're right. Let's rearrange the seating. And Matthew, you'll sit by my side, where you should have been all along. The room erupted in applause again. Some guests were even moved to tears. But the story didn't end there. Just when everyone thought emotions had settled, Richard took the microphone once more. There's one more thing, he announced. Matthew, do you remember our pact? Matthew's eyes widened. The promise they'd made as teenagers sitting by the river dreaming of the future. Richard, no. Yes. Richard smiled. We promised that when one of us got married, the other would be the real best man, no matter what our parents said. But the mayor's son, he'll have to forgive me, but there can only be one real best man. Richard turned to the well-dressed young man at the head table. Charles, you understand, right? It was my mother's doing. The mayor's son surprisingly smiled and nodded understandingly. So, Matthew Thompson, Richard theatrically knelt down. Will you be my best man, the real one? But I don't have a best man's suit, Matthew protested, laughing and crying at the same time. So what? Lauren interjected. Do you think I care? I got married barefoot. I accept, Matthew finally said. Of course I accept. What happened next stunned everyone. Several men in the room began removing their suit jackets. Dr. Worthington himself was the first, followed by others. If the best man's casual, we're all going casual, someone shouted. Within minutes, the most formal wedding of the year turned into the most relaxed and genuine party that Hall had ever seen. But Aunt Elaine still had a card up her sleeve. When the music started again and the newlyweds took to the dance floor, she approached Matthew. There's something I need to tell you, she said, looking nervous. What is it, Auntie? Your mother, Margaret. She left something for me to give you on the day of Richard's wedding. Aunt Elaine pulled a crumpled envelope from her purse. What do you mean? Matthew took the envelope with trembling hands. She gave this to me just before she passed. Said it was for you to open at Richard's wedding. I almost didn't give it to you, out of pride, spite. I don't know. Matthew opened the envelope slowly. Inside was a letter written in his mother's careful handwriting and something that took his breath away. A deed. This is the deed to the farm where you grew up, Aunt Elaine confirmed. Margaret never sold it. She kept it for you. Richard approached, curious about the commotion. What happened? Mom. She left the farm to me. Matthew showed the deed. Our farm, Richard. Where we fished, where we built the treehouse. Richard hugged his cousin tightly. We'll have to rebuild that treehouse. For our kids, he said, emotional. Our kids? Lauren walked over, smiling. Whoa, slow down. One step at a time, Richard laughed, kissing his wife. Margaret's letter read, My dear son, if you're reading this, it means Richard finally found the courage to get married. I hope Elaine gave you this letter as I asked. The farm is yours now, my son. I know you'll care for it with the same love your father and I did, but more important than the land is what it represents, our roots, our history, our love. Never be ashamed of who you are, my son. The greatest wealth we can have is a kind heart and a family who loves us. Take care of Richard. He'll need you even if he pretends he doesn't. And forgive Elaine, she has a good heart, she just lost her way a little. With eternal love, Mom. When Matthew finished reading the letter aloud, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Even some of the snobbiest guests were visibly moved. Your mother was a wise woman, Aunt Elaine said, wiping her tears. She was. Matthew carefully tucked the letter away. And she was right about you too, Auntie. What do you mean? She said you have a good heart, and today you proved it, Matthew smiled. The party continued, but now with a different energy. It was as if everyone had been reminded of what truly mattered in life. During dinner, Matthew finally sat at the head table between Richard and Aunt Elaine. The conversation flowed naturally, with childhood stories being shared and genuine laughter. Remember when you decided you were going to be a professional fisherman? Richard nudged Matthew. And you said you'd be my manager, Matthew laughed. We were going to get rich selling. Minnows, you fished the whole river and didn't catch a single fish. Aunt Elaine surprised everyone by laughing too. Margaret and I had to buy fish at the market so you wouldn't feel bad. You did that? Richard was shocked. We spent years believing we were the best fishermen in the world. Sometimes love is just that, Lauren commented. Letting the people we love believe in their dreams. Speaking of dreams, Matthew turned to Richard. What are you going to do with the office now? I heard you got an offer to open a branch in New York. I refused, Richard replied simply. Are you refused? Why? Aunt Elaine seemed surprised. It was an incredible opportunity. Because I realized something today, Richard looked around. My place is here, with my family, my friends, my roots. Success isn't just money and prestige. It's being able to sleep peacefully, knowing you haven't betrayed who you are. Besides, Lauren added, we want to raise our children near family the right way. Children? Aunt Elaine perked up. Are you? Not yet, Mom, Lauren laughed. But who knows, after a party like this, the laughter continued late into the night. At one point, the DJ announced a special song. This next song was a special request from the groom for his cousin and best man. The first notes of Moving Forward began to play. It was Margaret's favorite song, one she always sang. While cooking, Come on, Matthew. Richard pulled him onto the dance floor. Let's dance in honor of Aunt Margaret. The two cousins danced clumsily, laughing and remembering the woman who had been a mother to them at different times. Soon, Aunt Elaine joined. Them, then Lauren, and before long the dance floor was full. But not everything was perfect. Midway through the song, Matthew noticed a small group of guests whispering and pointing at him. They were some of Richard's colleagues from the office, known for their elitism. Forget them, Richard said, noticing his cousin's discomfort. It doesn't bother me, Matthew lied. Liar, I've known you too long. Richard stopped dancing. You know what? I'll be right back. Before Matthew could protest, Richard walked over to the group. Good evening, everyone. Enjoying the party? Oh yes, Richard, great party. One of them replied, clearly uncomfortable. Glad to hear it. Just wanted to let you know that as of Monday, you don't need to come into the office anymore. What? The man paled. You heard me. Consider yourselves fired. I don't need people in my office who can't see value beyond appearances, Richard said firmly. But Richard, it was just a comment that shows who you really are. Good night. Richard returned to the dance floor, leaving the group in shock. You didn't have to do that, Matthew said when his cousin came back. Yes, I did. I won't tolerate that kind of behavior. Not at my wedding, not in my office, not in my life. The night wore on, and more surprises were in store. During the traditional bouquet toss, Lauren made an announcement. Before I toss it, I want to do something different. This bouquet is going to someone specific. She walked through the crowd of single women and stopped in front of a lady about 70 years old, sitting alone at a table. Mrs. Constance, Lauren knelt before her. You're Matthew's neighbor, aren't you? The woman, surprised, simply nodded. Matthew told me how you took care of him after his mother passed, how you brought him food, washed his clothes, treated him like a grandson. Lauren held out the bouquet. This is for you, to show that love has no age or expiration date. Mrs. Constance began to cry as she took the bouquet. Matthew rushed to hug her. You're my second mother, he whispered. Oh, my boy, she held him tight. Your mother would be so proud of the man you've become. And to witness the most genuine wedding this hall has ever seen, added the owner of the catering service, who had approached. In 30 years of business, I've never seen anything like it. Dawn was approaching, and the party showed signs of winding down. But Richard still had one last surprise. Matthew, come here, he called his cousin to a quieter corner. What now? Haven't we had enough excitement for one night? Just one more thing. Richard handed him an envelope. Open it. Inside were partnership documents. What is this? I want you to be my partner. 50% of the firm. Richard, have you lost your mind? I don't even have a law degree. But you have something no university can teach. Integrity. Besides, you've always been good with numbers and organization. I need someone I trust to handle the administrative side. I can't accept this. Yes, you can, and you will. Matthew, you sold your bike to help me. You worked double shifts to pay my tuition when Mum got sick. This, he pointed to the documents, isn't charity, it's justice. But no buts. First thing tomorrow, we'll file the paperwork, and on Monday, you start working with me. Oh, and your starting salary is this. Richard showed a number that nearly made Matthew fall backward. That's too much money. It's fair for a partner. And guess what your first assignment will be? What? Renovating the farm. I want our first branch office to be there. A place where people from our hometown can access justice without having to come all the way here. Matthew couldn't speak. Tears streamed freely now. Are you serious? Never been more serious in my life. What do you say? I say, Matthew took a deep breath. I say yes. And that we're going to build the best public interest law firm this region has ever seen. The cousins embraced, as the remaining guests in the hall cheered, having witnessed the moment. Aunt Elaine approached, looking lighter than she had in years. I'm proud of you, son, she told Richard. Today you became the man your father never was. Thank you, Mom, that means everything to me. And Matthew, she turned to her nephew. Welcome to the family, officially. I know you've always been part of it, but now it's different. Thank you, Auntie, for everything, even the hard times, they made me stronger. Your mother would say you were born strong, Aunt Elaine smiled. She always knew you were special. As the last guests left, the four, Richard, Lauren, Matthew, and Aunt Elaine, sat at a table sharing the leftover cake and reminiscing about the extraordinary night. You know what's funny, Lauren remarked. We spent a fortune on this wedding to impress people we barely knew. And in the end, what mattered were the people who were always here, Richard finished. It's a valuable lesson, Aunt Elaine admitted. I spent so much time trying to be accepted by those who didn't matter that I almost lost the ones who truly do. But you didn't, Matthew held her hand. That's what family is. We argue, we drift apart, but in the end, love always wins. Speaking of family, Lauren took Richard's hand, I think it's time to share our little secret. What secret? Richard looked confused. The one I found out this morning, but waited for the right moment to tell, she smiled. We're having a baby. The silence that followed was broken by Aunt Elaine's joyful scream. A grandbaby. I'm going to be a grandmother. Or granddaughter, Lauren corrected, laughing. You're pregnant. Richard was in shock. We're having a baby. Yes, my love, our child will grow up surrounded by real love, not appearances. Matthew was the first to recover, hugging the couple. I'm going to be an uncle, Uncle Matthew. And you'll be the best uncle in the world, Richard said, emotional. Just like Aunt Margaret was the best aunt we could have asked for. We'll raise this child right, Aunt Elaine said, determined. With real values, none of that nonsense about appearances that almost destroyed our family. Let's raise her at the farm, Matthew suggested. With space to run, climb, trees, fish in the river, and get clothes dirty without anyone complaining, Richard added, laughing. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky pink and gold, the four of them kept talking, making plans for the future. The empty hall, with leftover decorations and abandoned glasses, was a silent witness to the transformation that had happened that night. Matthew took out his phone and snapped a picture of the four of them. So we always remember this night, he said. The night our family was reborn, Aunt Elaine finished. The night I learned that being humiliated can be the start of something extraordinary, Matthew added. The night we chose love over appearances. Richard hugged Lauren. The night we began building a different future. Lauren touched her still flat stomach. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. But the story doesn't end here. The following months brought deep changes for everyone. Matthew, now a partner at the firm, discovered he had a natural talent for management. He implemented a free legal service for those in need once a week, something Richard had always wanted to do but didn't know how to organize. "You were right," Richard said one day, reviewing the numbers. "Since we started the pro bono work, our paying clients have increased by 40%. People value companies with a social conscience," Matthew explained. "Besides, it's the right thing to do." Aunt Elaine, in turn, went through her own transformation. She started visiting the farm regularly, helping with renovations. "You know, I'd forgotten how good it feels to get my hands dirty in the soil," she said one day, planting jabuticaba saplings. "I grew up doing this and spent years pretending I didn't know how." "It's never too late to return to your roots, Auntie," Matthew replied, digging beside her. "Your mother always said that." Margaret was wise. The farm slowly transformed. The main house was renovated while keeping its original charm. The famous tree where the boys had built their treehouse got a new, safer structure for the next generation. "Look," Richard pointed to the sign they'd placed at the entrance. "Thompson and Wilson Law Firm, Rural Branch. Has a nice ring to it. Margaret would be proud," Aunt Elaine remarked. "She is," Matthew said with conviction. "I can feel it." 6 months after the wedding, Sophie was born, the first granddaughter. The birth happened in the early hours, and Matthew was the first to arrive at the hospital, still in his pajamas. "Meet your niece," Richard said, handing the baby to him. "Sophie Margaret Wilson." "Margaret?" Matthew was moved. "We couldn't have chosen any other name," Lauren said from the bed. "She'll grow up knowing who her great-aunt was." Aunt Elaine arrived soon after, carrying a blanket she'd knitted herself. "I learned from Margaret," she explained. "I'd forgotten how, but my hands remembered." Little Sophie grew up between the city office and the farm, learning early on that family is more than blood ties and that true wealth isn't measured in money. 2 years later, at Sophie's birthday, they were all gathered at the farm. The party was simple: homemade cake, handmade decorations, music from the guitar Matthew had learned to play. "You know," Aunt Elaine remarked, watching her granddaughter chase after the chickens, "I spent a fortune on Richard's wedding to impress people I never saw again. And the most beautiful party I've ever been to is this one, which cost almost nothing." "The value is in people, not things," Matthew said, strumming the guitar. "Do you remember what you said at my wedding?" Richard asked his cousin. "That being humiliated was the beginning of something extraordinary." "I do, and I stand by it." "Well, I say humiliating you was the worst thing I ever did," Aunt Elaine interrupted. "And also, what taught me the most." "How so, Aunt?" "It taught me that pride blinds, that the fear of being poor again can make us poor in spirit, that we can gain the world and lose our souls. But you found your way back," Matthew touched her arm. "Thanks to you, all of you." Lauren appeared with Sophie in her arms, the little girl covered in dirt and wearing the brightest smile in the world. "Grandma, I got worms." "How wonderful, sweetheart." Aunt Elaine took her granddaughter without minding the mess. "Shall we wash our hands and have some cake?" "Cake!" Sophie cheered. As they walked toward the house, Matthew lingered behind, watching his family. The family he had nearly lost to pride and prejudice, but love had brought back together. Richard returned and slung an arm over his shoulders. "What's on your mind? How much has changed? 2 years ago, I was hiding behind a pillar at your wedding, dying of shame. And now you're my partner, my brother, my daughter's godfather. Funny how life works." "You know what's even funnier?" Matthew smiled. "If I could go back in time, I wouldn't change a thing, not even the humiliation." "Why?" "Because we had to go through that to get here. For your mother to learn, for you to take a stand, for our family to rebuild. You really are Aunt Margaret's son," Richard laughed, "always seeing the bright side. Learned from the best." That afternoon, as they celebrated Sophie's life, no one could have imagined the challenges still ahead. Life, after all, is full of ups and downs, and sometimes the lessons we learn aren't enough to prevent new mistakes. 3 months later, the firm received a tempting offer to represent a major company in a case that could earn them millions. The problem? The company wanted to evict dozens of families from land they'd occupied for generations. "It's a lot of money, Matthew," Richard was tempted. "We could expand, hire more people, help more folks." "Help folks by evicting families?" Matthew questioned. It's legal. They don't have deeds. We didn't have deeds for the farm for years. Did that make it any less ours? The argument stretched on for days. Surprisingly, Aunt Elaine sided with Matthew. Son, money can be earned in many ways, but dignity once lost is hard to regain. You've really changed, Richard remarked. Your daughter changed me. I want her to be proud of her grandparents when she grows up. In the end, they turned down the case, but the decision had consequences. Some big clients, hearing of their refusal, took their business elsewhere. We're losing money, Richard worried. We're gaining something more valuable, Matthew insisted. And he was right. Word of their refusal spread, and soon the firm was flooded with clients who valued ethics over profit. Small business owners, workers, ordinary people who needed honest representation. One day, an elegant, well-dressed elderly woman walked into the office. There was something familiar about her. I'm looking for Dr. Matthew Thompson, she said. That's me, Matthew greeted her. How can I help? My name is Helen Worthington. I'm the sister of Dr. Worthington, who attended your cousin's wedding. Oh yes, how is he? He passed 6 months ago, she said sadly. But before he left, he made me promise something. What? That I'd come to you if I ever needed legal help. He said you were the only honest lawyers he'd met in 50 years of practice. Matthew was moved. Aunt Helen's case was complex, a years-long family dispute over inheritance, but it wasn't just the case that mattered. You know, she said during one of their meetings, my brother told me about the wedding, about how you were humiliated and how your cousin defended you. It was a difficult moment, but transformative. My brother came home that night saying he'd witnessed something rare, people choosing integrity over appearances. It deeply moved him. Aunt Helen's case was resolved with justice, not just legally but humanely. The conflicting parties, inspired by the firm's approach, ended up reconciling. You're not just lawyers, Aunt Helen said at their final meeting. You're healers of souls. Meanwhile, at the farm, the rural office thrived. People from all over the region came seeking legal advice, often paying with farm goods. Another chicken? Lauren laughed when she saw the day's payment. Better than nothing, Matthew replied, and Aunt Maria insists on paying somehow. We'll have to build another chicken coop, Richard joked, or host a big community lunch, Aunt Elaine suggested. We could do it every month, invite the whole community. And so, the tradition of community lunches at the farm began. Every first Sunday of the month, tables were set under the trees and everyone was welcome. Rich and poor, clients and friends all sat together. It was at one of these lunches that Matthew met Claire, a teacher at the rural school. She had brought some students to visit the farm. They've never seen a real garden, she explained. Kids these days think food comes from the supermarket. Can I show them around? Matthew offered. The afternoon flew by. Matthew taught the children about planting, the importance of the land, and respecting nature. Claire watched enchanted. You have a way with children, she remarked. I learned from my mother. She always said kids are like plants. They need care, patience, and lots of love. Your mother sounds like she was a special woman. She was, and I think she'd approve of you, Matthew said without thinking, then blushed. Claire smiled. From that day on, she started visiting the farm more often, always with the excuse of educational projects. She likes you, Lauren teased Matthew. We're just friends. Margaret used to say the same about me and Richard, Aunt Elaine chimed in. Look how that turned out. The bond grew gradually, naturally. Claire fit into the family, as if she'd always belonged there. Sophie adored her, always asking Aunt Claire to tell stories. A year later, it was Matthew's turn to marry. But what a difference from Richard's wedding. The ceremony was held at the farm, under the same tree where he and Richard had played as children. No luxury, no show, Claire had said. Just love and truth. Aunt Elaine was the first to support it. I've learned my lesson. What matters is love, not how fancy the party looks. The wedding was beautiful in its simplicity. Wildflowers, homemade food, live music from local guitarists. Richard was the best man, of course. Remember our promise, Richard said in his speech, that we'd be each other's best men, and that our kids would grow up together, Matthew added. Well, here we are. Promises kept. During the celebration, Aunt Elaine gave a speech that moved everyone. Years ago, I humiliated this man I now call my son. I let pride and prejudice speak louder than love. I nearly tore our family apart over appearances. She paused, looking at Matthew. Today, I see you marrying a wonderful woman, surrounded by real love, and I thank God for the second chance he gave me. Margaret, wherever she is, must be proud. I know I am. The party lasted until dawn, filled with dancing, stories, and endless joy. No extravagance, just an abundance of genuine warmth. 2 years passed. The office was thriving in both locations. Sophie was now 4 years old and had a little brother, Peter. Claire was pregnant with her first child with Matthew. The family is growing, Richard remarked one day, watching the children play. The right way, Matthew replied. With love, values, truth. Boysun, you know what amazes me the most? Aunt Elaine joined them. How everything changed after that moment at the wedding. If I hadn't been so cruel, none of this would exist. Don't think like that, Auntie. No, it's true. Sometimes we need to make big mistakes to learn how to do things right. My mistake brought redemption for all of us. But life still held surprises. One day a young man showed up at the office looking for Matthew. Mr. Thompson, my name is Gabriel. I'm your father's son. The silence was deafening. Matthew's father had abandoned the family when he was 5. They'd never heard from him again. How did you find me? Matthew managed to ask. Our father passed away last month. Before he died, he told me about you, about the family he left behind. He gave me this address. Gabriel was 20, almost a younger copy of Matthew. The resemblance was undeniable. Why did you come looking for me? Because I grew up hearing I had a brother somewhere. Because our father died with your name on his lips, asking for forgiveness. Because I have no one else. It was Claire who broke the silence. Come in, Gabriel. Let's talk calmly. The story Gabriel told was a sad one. Their father had started a new family but never forgot his first. Guilt consumed him, but pride kept him from returning. He kept a photo of you. Gabriel showed an old picture of Matthew as a child. He said it was his biggest regret. Matthew wrestled with conflicting emotions, anger over the abandonment, pity for his blameless brother, confusion about what to do. It was Aunt Elaine who offered the needed perspective. Matthew, you know better than anyone that family isn't just blood. It's a choice. This boy isn't to blame for his father's mistakes, just like you weren't. But Margaret welcomed Richard and me when we needed it. Will you deny your brother the same chance? The decision wasn't easy or immediate. Matthew needed time to process. Gabriel stayed in town at a boarding house, waiting. A week later, Matthew showed up there. I made a promise to my mother, he said. That I'd be the man my father wasn't. Come on, let's go home. Home? Yeah? You have a sister-in-law to meet, nephews to play with, a family to be part of. If you want? Gabriel cried like a child. The brothers embraced, united by the high pain of abandonment, but also by the hope of a different future. Gabriel's integration into the family was surprisingly smooth. He had the same integrity as Matthew, the same kindness. Soon he was working at the office, learning, growing. It's strange, he said one day. I spent my whole life imagining what a real family would be like. Reality is better than imagination. A real family isn't perfect, Richard explained. It's real. There are fights, misunderstandings, but in the end, love always wins. The farmhouse now held an even bigger family. At their communal lunches, the main table was always full. Richard and Lauren with Sophie and Peter, Matthew and Claire with little Jack and another on the way, Gabriel with his new girlfriend, and Aunt Elaine presiding over it all with the pride of someone who'd learned that true family isn't measured by blood or appearances, but by love and choice. 5 years had passed since that fateful wedding. They were all gathered to celebrate Aunt Elaine's birthday. 70 years, she said, moved, and the best were these last 5. Why, Grandma? Sophie asked. Because that's when I learned what really matters, my love, when I chose love over pride. Tell the story of Daddy's wedding, Peter begged. When Uncle Matthew got yelled at, it wasn't exactly yelling, Matthew corrected with a laugh. Tell us, Grandma. And off Aunt Elaine went, telling for the 1,000th time the story of the wedding that changed everything. The children listened, fascinated, even though they already knew every detail. And that's how our family became what it is today, she concluded. Strong, united, true. But why were you mean to Uncle Matthew, Grandma? Sophie asked with childlike innocence. Because sometimes, my love, adults forget what's important. We get caught up in silly things like fancy clothes, expensive cars, big houses, and we forget that what matters is the heart. I'll never forget, the little girl promised solemnly. I hope not, my dear, I hope not. That night, after the children had gone to bed and the adults stayed talking under the stars, Matthew reflected, you know, if someone had told me 5 years ago that being humiliated at Richard's wedding would be the best thing that ever happened to me, I'd have laughed. But it was. Claire squeezed his hand. It was. It gave me a bigger family, a purpose, a life I never imagined. It gave me the chance to redeem myself, Aunt Elaine added, to become the person Margaret always saw in me, even when I couldn't see it myself. It gave us the chance to build something real, Richard finished. No masks, no lies. And the best part, Gabriel, the long-lost brother, said, it gave me the family I always dreamed of having. They fell silent, savoring the moment. The farm was peaceful, only the sound of crickets and the wind in the trees. The same land that had watched two boys grow up as brothers now sheltered an entire family, built not just by blood, but by choices, forgiveness, and love. Margaret would be proud, Aunt Elaine broke the silence. She is, Matthew corrected. Somehow, she's here, in every value we pass on to the children, in every act of kindness, in every choice of love over pride. Out in Sophie's name, Lauren remembered. In Jack's heart, Claire touched her belly where their second child grew. In all of us, Richard concluded. The full moon bathed the farm, the same land where it all began, where two boys once fished for dreams in a river that barely had any fish, where a woman named Margaret taught them that true wealth isn't kept in a bank. A toast. Matthew raised his glass of jabuticaba juice. May 5 years from now, we all be here again, with an even bigger family, telling this story to more children. And may they learn early, Aunt Elaine raised her glass, that family is love, not appearances. Say us that success is sleeping with a clear conscience, Richard toasted. That forgiveness frees the one who forgives most, Gabriel added. That love always finds a way, Claire finished. To Margaret, Lauren proposed. Who, even gone, still brings this family together. To Margaret, they all toasted. That night, as they returned to their homes, Matthew and Claire had built a house on the farm, near the main house where Richard and Lauren stayed when not in the city. Each carried in their heart the certainty that they were part of something special. Gabriel, walking beside Matthew, remarked, You know, our father missed the chance to be part of this. He did, but his wrong choices brought us you. So in some twisted way, he contributed. Did you forgive him? It took time, but yes, holding on to anger is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. Margaret taught me that. She must have been amazing. She was, and somehow, she still is. She lives in all of us. The next day, routine returned. Office work, cases, clients. But now with one difference, Gabriel was officially part of the team. 3 partners, some clients questioned. 3 brothers, Richard corrected, united by the purpose of delivering real justice. The firm had become a benchmark for compassionate law. Law students would come to intern, wanting to learn not just about laws, but about values. What you teach here isn't in any book, said one intern. Because life isn't learned from a book, Matthew replied. It's learned by living, making mistakes, forgiving, starting over. One day, a well-dressed, clearly wealthy man appeared at the office. I'm looking for Dr. Matthew Thompson. That's me. My name is Charles Blackwood. I was your schoolmate. Matthew remembered. Charles was one of the rich boys who had humiliated him for being poor. What do you want? Help, and to apologize. Charles's story was common: financial success, personal failure, divorce, children who wanted nothing to do with him, loneliness in a mansion. I saw a report about you, about how you turned humiliation into success. I need to learn that. We didn't turn humiliation into success, Matthew corrected. We turned pain into lessons, pride into humility, appearances into essence. Will you teach me? It's not something you teach, it's something you choose to live. Charles became a client, but more than that, he began attending the community lunches at the farm. Little by little, he learned that his millions were worth less than an afternoon fishing with his children, that reconciliation was worth more than pride. I spent my whole life chasing what you always had, he said one day. A real family. It's never too late to build, Claire encouraged him. And he did. Slowly, with mistakes and triumphs, Charles rebuilt his bonds with his children. He sold the mansion, bought a simple house near the farm. He discovered the joy of getting his hands dirty in the soil, of laughing without an agenda, of just being Charles, not the businessman Blackwood. Funny, he remarked to Matthew. I used to humiliate. You for being poor. Now I see that I was the poor one. We were children. Children repeat what they learn. You learned differently. I had Margaret. I had love. That makes all the difference. The years kept passing. The children grew. New ones arrived. The farm became an informal community center where families gathered, where problems were solved with conversation and coffee, where life happened in its truest form. Sophie, now 10, was writing a school essay about family. Can I read it to you? She asked during one of the Sunday lunches. Of course, my dear, Aunt Elaine, now a great-grandmother to many, encouraged her. My family is different. Not because we have a lot of money, we don't. Not because we live in a big house, ours is simple. My family is different because we choose to love. My Uncle Matthew isn't related by blood, but he's more of a brother to my father than many real brothers. My Uncle Gabriel came out of nowhere, but now it's like he's always been here. My great-grandmother Elaine made many mistakes, but she learned to make things right. In my family, no one is perfect, but everyone tries to be better. Yes, we argue, but we apologize. Yes, we make mistakes, but we learn. My family taught me that fancy clothes don't make anyone better. That money is good, but love is better. That forgiving frees the one who forgives most. That true family is chosen every day. That's why my family is different, because it's real. When Sophie finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Even Charles, the transformed former classmate, discreetly wiped away tears. Where did so much wisdom come from? Someone asked. From life, Sophie answered simply. From watching all of you live. Matthew and Richard exchanged a glance. In that moment, they saw Margaret in each other's eyes. The woman who planted the seeds was now reaping through generations. We did it, Richard whispered. Did what? Passed it on. What Margaret taught us, what we learned from our mistakes, it's alive in them. And it was. In the children who played without caring about the clothes they wore. In the teenagers who brought friends from all walks of life. In the adults who chose integrity over easy profit. But the final proof came unexpectedly. One day, a delegation showed up at the office, well-dressed men and women with an air of importance. We're from the Silverstone Group. We want to buy your firm. The offer was tempting. Millions for the brand they had built, for their reputation of integrity. Why, Matthew wanted to know. You have something money can't buy. Credibility. We want that. And what would happen to our principles? Well, some adjustments would be necessary to maximize profits. Richard, Matthew, and Gabriel exchanged glances. They didn't even need to discuss it. Thank you, but it's not for sale, Matthew replied. Everything is for sale. It's just a matter of price. That's where you're wrong, Richard stood up. Some things don't have a price. Integrity is one of them. You'll regret this. It's a lot of money to turn down. We've turned down things more valuable than money. Gabriel chimed in. We've turned down family out of pride. We've learned from our mistakes. After the delegation left, the three brothers sat in silence. We could have retired, Gabriel remarked. Why? Matthew asked. To do what? Exactly, Richard agreed. We already have everything that matters. And they truly did. That evening at the family dinner, now so large they needed 2 tables, they shared the news about the offer. And you turned it down? Someone asked. Of course, Sophie answered before the adults could. Grandma Elaine always says, money can be earned again, dignity can't. When did this girl get so wise? Aunt Elaine laughed, proud. By being around you, Claire replied. Children absorb what we live, not what we say. The conversation flowed, as it always did at these gatherings. Stories were told and retold, plans were made, dreams shared. You know, Matthew said at one point, today marks exactly 10 years since Richard's wedding. The day I was humiliated, he added, though now laughing. The day everything changed, Aunt Elaine corrected. Let's throw a party, the children suggested. We already are. Lauren pointed around. Every day, and it was true. Every day with this family was a celebration, not with luxury or show, but with presence, with truth, with love. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Matthew stepped outside to walk around the farm. The moon was full again, just like that. Night 10 years ago. He stopped under the jabuticaba tree Margaret had planted when he was born. We did it, Mom, he whispered. We built the family you dreamed of, not the way we imagined, but the right way. The wind rustled the branches, and for a moment Matthew could have sworn he heard her voice. I always knew you would, my son. I always knew. Claire appeared, wrapping him in a hug. Thinking about Margaret. Always. But now with gratitude, not painful longing. She's in everything we've built. In every choice of love over pride. They stood there under the jabuticaba tree, planning the future. More children would come, the firm would keep growing, the farm would welcome more families. But their values would remain the same, because they had learned through pain and forgiveness that true family isn't measured by blood or last names, by clothes or bank accounts. True family is built with daily choices of love, understanding, and acceptance. And so, what began with humiliation at a lavish wedding had become the greatest wealth they could have. A family bound by ties stronger than any social convention. 10 years after that fateful wedding, they hadn't just overcome the humiliation. They had turned it into the foundation for something far greater, a legacy of love and integrity that would last generations. Because in the end, as Margaret always said, what remains isn't what we have, but who we are. And they had chosen to be family, for real. The farm slept peacefully under the moon, its soil holding the memories of a family that had learned the greatest transformations arise from the hardest moments, and that true love knows no barriers of class, appearance, or convention. It was only the beginning of many more stories, but the main lesson was already etched in every heart. Family is a choice, and they chose every day to choose one another. But life, as always, still held surprises. 3 months after rejecting the $1 million offer, the firm faced its biggest crisis. A lawsuit filed by a disgruntled former client threatened not only their reputation, but the survival of the business. He claims we missed the deadline on purpose, Gabriel explained, in the emergency meeting. But we have all the documentation proving otherwise, Richard argued. The problem is the judge on the case is his cousin, Matthew revealed. A heavy silence fell over the room. Everyone knew what that meant in a small town. We can request a recusal, Claire suggested. She had graduated from law school and now worked at the firm too. And pick a fight with half the local judiciary? Aunt Elaine, who was observing the meeting, questioned. So what do we do? Just accept the injustice? Sophie, now 15 and determined to pursue a legal career, was outraged. We do what we've always done, Matthew decided. We act with integrity and let the truth come out. But the truth was slow to emerge. The lawsuit dragged on, clients began questioning, and some cases were transferred to other firms. Maybe we should have taken the buyout offer, Gabriel C. muttered in a moment of discouragement. Never, Richard said firmly. If we give in now, everything we've built loses its meaning. It was Claire who found the solution. Digging through old cases, she discovered the former client had made the same accusation against 3 other firms. It's a pattern, she showed the documents. He sues lawyers expecting financial settlements. With this information, they managed to overturn the case. But the damage was done. The firm had lost half its clients. We'll have to start over, Matthew said at the family meeting. Then we start over, Lauren supported. It wouldn't be the first time, but now we have more mouths to feed. Richard pointed to the children. And more hands to work, as Sophie offered. I can help at the firm after school. Me too, Jack, Matthew's son, volunteered. And I can go back to teaching, Claire suggested, to supplement our income. We can grow a garden and sell at the market, the younger children chimed in. Aunt Elaine watched it all with teary eyes. What's wrong, Grandma? Peter asked. Nothing. My love, I just see Margaret in all of you. She used to say, family is this. When one falls, everyone rises together, and that's exactly what they did. The following months were tough. Everyone worked harder, earned less. But something beautiful happened. The community responded. Aunt. Constance, the neighbor who had cared for Matthew, organized a gathering. You've helped so many people without charging, as she said. Now it's our turn to help. Old clients returned. New ones appeared, drawn precisely by how they had handled the crisis. Anyone can have integrity when things are going. Well, a new client remarked, I want lawyers who stick to their principles even in hardship. A year later, the firm hadn't just recovered, it was stronger. The experience had brought the family even closer and deepened their ties to the community. That's when the second buyout offer arrived, this time from a group known for predatory practices. We know the difficulties you've faced, the representative said. Our offer still stands even higher considering the resilience you've shown. The answer is still no. Matthew didn't hesitate. You're stubborn. We prefer the term consistent, Richard corrected. After the man left, Gabriel commented, You know what's funny? A year ago we might have considered it. Today I don't even think about it. Why? Claire asked. Because we've proven we can overcome anything together. That's priceless. The kids' teenage years brought new challenges. Sophie especially began questioning family values. Why do we always have to be the good guys, Aunt? She asked one day. Why can't we make money like everyone else? We do make money, Matthew replied calmly. But we could make more if we weren't so ethical, probably. So what? Then we'd have a better life. Better how? Claire interjected. With more things and less peace? More money and less family? You just don't get it. Sophie stormed out, slamming the door. It was Aunt Elaine who went to talk to her. You know, I used to think like you, she said, sitting beside her great-granddaughter. Really? Very much so. I spent years chasing status, appearances, money. Know what I got? What? Almost lost everything. That truly mattered. Almost lost your father, your Uncle Matthew, our family. But you got it all back. Because they forgave me. Because they chose love over resentment. But I could have lost them forever, Sophie. And no amount of money would have made up for that. It's hard being different at school, Sophie confessed. The girls have designer clothes, expensive phones. And you have something they'd give anything for. A family that truly loves each other. It might not seem like much now, but one day you'll understand its worth. Sophie hugged her great-grandmother, tears finally falling. I'm sorry, Grandma, I know you're right. It's just sometimes it's hard. I know, sweetheart. But the right things usually are. The conversation marked a turning point for Sophie. She began engaging more with the office, especially the pro bono cases. I want to make a difference, she declared. Like you do. You already do, Matthew assured her. Just by questioning, by thinking, by consciously choosing our values, you're already making a difference. The years kept passing. Marriages, births, some losses. Aunt Constance passed on a Sunday afternoon, surrounded by everyone she considered family. Take care of each other, were her last words. Like Margaret would have wanted. The loss shook everyone, but also brought them closer. At the simple yet love-filled funeral, Matthew gave a speech. Aunt Constance taught us that family has no borders, that love doesn't need blood ties. She was a mother when I needed one, just as Margaret was a mother to many. That's their legacy, limitless love. Gabriel, who had married a girl from the city, announced they were expecting their first child. If it's a girl, we'll name her Margaret, he said. Constance, if it's the second. And if it's a boy, someone asked. Matthew, he looked at his brother, because I want him to have the same strength of character. Emotions overwhelmed everyone. The family grew, multiplied, but the values remained solid. More challenges came. The economy took a downturn, clients couldn't pay, and the office had to adapt again. We could accept payment in goods. Jack, now a licensed lawyer, suggested. Like we did in the beginning. Back to our roots, Richard laughed. Why not? And it worked. The office became a trading hub, where legal services were exchanged for food, services, crafts. The community grew even stronger. You've reinvented solidarity economics, a visiting professor remarked. Could I bring my students to learn? Of course, Matthew agreed. But make it clear we didn't invent anything. We're just living as our community always has, before money became more important than people. Student visits became a regular occurrence. The farm became a case study, the office an example of humanized management. That wasn't the plan, Claire remarked one day. The best outcomes never are, Matthew replied. They happen when we do the right thing without expecting a reward. Sophie graduated from law school with honors. In her graduation speech, she surprised everyone. I learned the law in school, but I learned justice at home, from a father who chose integrity over profit, from an uncle who was humiliated but responded with dignity, from a great-grandmother who made many mistakes but had the courage to change, from a family that taught me success isn't measured in money, but in peace of mind. After the ceremony, a prestigious New York firm approached her with a job offer. Starting salary in the 5 figures, they said. Fast-track career path. Thank you, Sophie answered. But I already have a job. At my family's firm. But there you'd only make... There I gain something you can't offer, purpose. I work with people I admire for causes I believe in, building the world I want for my children. You don't have children? Not yet, she smiled. But when I do, I want to look them in the eye without shame. Sophie's decision inspired other young people in the region. Many who had left for big cities began returning, bringing knowledge but keeping their values. We're creating something here, Gabriel observed. Bigger than a firm, a new way of living. An old way, Aunt Elaine corrected. We're just remembering what we'd forgotten. At 90, Aunt Elaine still took an active part in family life. On her birthday, she made a request. I want to go back to the hall where Richard's wedding was held. Why, Mum? Richard asked, puzzled. To give thanks, to apologize, to close the circle. They arranged the visit. The hall was empty, prepped for another event. The manager, the same one from 20 years ago, greeted them. I remember, yes, he said, the wedding that became a revolution. Revolution? Matthew asked. It changed a lot around here. After that night, many families rethought their priorities. Some weddings after that were much simpler, more genuine. Aunt Elaine walked to the center of the hall where it had all happened. It was here, she said. Here I humiliated you, Matthew. Here I nearly destroyed our family. And here we were reborn. Matthew hugged her. No need to apologize again, Aunt. It was all forgiven long ago. I know, but I needed to come back. I needed to thank the place where I learned the most important lesson of my life. What lesson? The curious manager asked. That real family doesn't care about appearances. That true love sees no social class. That a moment of humiliation can become the greatest blessing if we have the courage to learn from it. They left the hall in silence, each reflecting on their 2-decade journey. From a wedding that seemed perfect but hid prejudices, to a family that embraced its imperfections with love. In the car on the way home, Sophie made a suggestion. We should write a book, our story. Why? Richard asked. To show it's possible. That families can reinvent themselves. That love conquers pride. That integrity pays off. From shame to love. How a humiliation saved our family. Jack suggested the title. Everyone laughed, but the idea stuck. Claire, with her talent for writing, began documenting the stories. Not for fame or money, but to leave a legacy. For our grandchildren and great-grandchildren, she explained, so they never forget where we came from and where we're going. The book was never commercially published. It stayed in the family, a handwritten manuscript passed from hand to hand with new stories added each year. But the real legacy wasn't in words. It was in daily choices, in lived values, in love shown. 20 years after that wedding, the Thompson-Wilson family, as they became known in the region, was not a reference for wealth or status, but for something far more valuable: authenticity. You know what impresses me the most? A visitor once remarked during one of their famous community lunches, You're exactly who you appear to be. No masks, no pretenses. We learned masks are too heavy to carry, Matthew replied. It's easier to just be ourselves. Even if it means being humiliated, the visitor pressed. Especially if it means being humiliated, Richard interjected, because humiliation only affects those with misplaced pride. When you know who you are, words can't diminish you. Besides, Aunt Elaine, still sharp and engaged at 90, added, sometimes we need to be humbled to learn humility. That's what happened to me. The conversation flowed as it always did at these gatherings. People of all ages and backgrounds sharing meals and stories, learning from one another. Sophie, now a respected lawyer, was planning her wedding to Peter, a fisherman's son she'd met during a pro bono case. It'll be here at the farm, she announced, simple, genuine with the people who matter. Are you sure? Aunt Elaine asked, though she was smiling. We could do something more elaborate. Grandma, Sophie took her wrinkled hands, you taught me that elaborate isn't always better. I want a wedding that celebrates love, not status. Then it'll be perfect, her great-grandmother hugged her, and it was. Under the same trees that had witnessed so many stories, Sophie and Peter married, surrounded by a family that had learned love sees no social differences. In his speech, Matthew moved everyone. 20 years ago, I was humiliated for wearing simple clothes to a wedding. Today I watch my daughter marry someone from humble roots like ours, and I feel nothing but pride. Because she learned what took us years to understand. A person's worth isn't in what they wear or own, but in who they are. Richard added, that day I defended my cousin because it was the right thing. Now I see he was the one defending me, saving me from becoming someone I wasn't, from losing myself to appearances. Gabriel also spoke. I came into this family a stranger, the son of the man who abandoned you. You welcomed me as a brother. That taught me family is chosen, built, nurtured. Thank you for choosing me. Claire was brief but profound. Margaret planted the seeds. Elaine had the courage to change the garden. We are the fruits. And what fruits? Different, unique, but all from the same tree, the tree of true love. Finally, Aunt Elaine rose with effort but determination. I should have died of shame 20 years ago when my prejudice was exposed. Instead, I chose to live to make amends. Today at 90, I can say, every day was worth it. To see this family united, these values passed on, love triumphing over pride, this is my greatest legacy. The celebration lasted well into the night. Simple in decor, rich in joy. Fishermen danced with lawyers, teachers chatted with farmers. Children ran freely among them all. It's beautiful, isn't it? Peter murmured to Sophie as they danced. What? Your family, our family now, how everyone treats each other as equals. It wasn't always this way, Sophie admitted. There was pain, mistakes, so much forgiveness. That's why it's beautiful. Because it's real. And that was the beauty of it. A real family with real flaws, who chose real love over false perfection. Months later, on an ordinary morning, Matthew found Aunt Elaine sitting quietly beneath the jabuticaba tree. Auntie, everything all right? She smiled, serene. I'm talking to Margaret, telling her how everything turned out, how you grew, how Richard became a man of integrity, how we built the family she dreamed of. She knows. Matthew sat beside her. Somehow she always knew. You know, I think my time is coming. Don't say that, Aunt. It's not sadness, my dear. It's peace. I've lived long enough to redeem myself, to see the fruits of forgiveness, to learn that love is stronger than pride. I can go in peace. We still need you. No, you already have everything you need. The values have been passed down, the lessons learned, the love solidified. My work is done. 2 weeks later, Aunt Elaine passed away in her sleep, serene at peace with a smile on her lips. The funeral was a celebration of transformation. Hundreds came to pay their respects, not to the wealthy Mrs. Elaine of 20 years ago, but to the woman who had the courage to change, to ask for forgiveness, to choose love. She taught me it's never too late to start over, said a woman who had once been humiliated by Elaine, but later became her friend. She showed me pride is a prison, humility is freedom, added another. Sophie read excerpts from the family book Claire had written. At 70, Elaine discovered what many never do, that the greatest wealth is sleeping without guilt, waking without masks, living without pretense. She traded a lifetime of appearances for a decade of truth, and she said every second was worth it. At the estate, they planted a tree in her memory. Beside Margaret's jaboticaba tree, Elaine's mango tree would now grow. 2 women, 2 paths, 1 destiny, Matthew reflected. Love. Life went on, as it always does. New challenges arose. Gabriel became a judge, known for his integrity. Sophie had twins, who grew up running through the same places their father once had. Jack opened a school at the estate, teaching not just subjects but values. The law firm became a cooperative, with young attorneys who shared the same principles, serving everyone from ethical corporations to the humblest citizen with equal respect. It's not a business model, a consultant once remarked. It's a philosophy of life. Exactly, Richard replied. That's why it works. One afternoon, Matthew was reviewing case files when Sophie walked in with the twins. Daddy, tell us the story of Uncle Richard's wedding again. Again? Matthew laughed. You already know it by heart. But we love hearing it, how you got yelled at and then became important. I didn't become important, Matthew corrected. I realized I already was. We all are. We just need someone to remind us, like Uncle Richard reminded you, like Grandma Claire reminds me every day, like Great-Grandma Elaine learned to remind everyone, like each of us can remind one another. I'm going to remind everyone when I grow up, one twin promised. Then you're already doing the most important thing, Matthew hugged them. That evening, during another family dinner that now required 3 tables, Matthew raised a toast. To Margaret, who planted the seed, to Elaine, who had the courage to change, to all of us who choose to carry on, and to those yet to come who will take it forward. To those yet to come, everyone cheered. Outside, the 2 trees swayed gently. In the wind, the old jaboticaba and the young mango, roots intertwined, branches touching like the lives they represented. 25 years after that transformative wedding, the lesson still lived. Humiliation can be a blessing in disguise. Pride can turn to humility. Appearances can give way to essence. And love, oh love, always finds a way to win. Even if it takes 20 years, even if it needs forgiveness, even if it begins with tears. Because true family isn't about perfection. It's about choosing to love every day, despite the flaws. It's about turning the worst moments into the greatest lessons. It's about looking beyond appearances and seeing the heart. At the Thompson-Wilson estate, that truth lived in every corner, every story, every embrace. A living testament that, no matter how hard the fall, it's always possible to get back up. Not alone, but together. Not with pride, but with love. And so, what began as the worst night of Matthew's life became the foundation of the most genuine family that region had ever known, proving day after day that the best stories aren't the perfect ones, but the real ones. Those written with mistakes and triumphs, with forgiveness and overcoming, with the indelible ink of true love. Because in the end, as Margaret always knew, and Aunt Elaine learned, what remains isn't the clothes we wear or the titles we hold. What remains is the love we share, the lives we touch, the legacy we leave in the hearts of those we choose to call family. And in that family, this legacy was secured for generations. The end of the story. And so concludes our heartfelt journey. If you've made it this far, tell us, what did you think of Aunt Elaine's transformation? Have you experienced something similar in your own family? Leave your like and subscribe for more touching stories. Thank you for your company.